When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow.
Welcome to the OShow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. We have a favorite back this week because there's so much to talk about. Douglas from the True North Eager Beaver podcast. He has all the deets on everything and a lot of opinions as well. Before we get into talk of all things that Canadians are preoccupied with, I want to just let you know a couple show notes. We're going to have the top American strategist Matthew Dowd back on the program. When he was on the pod in the early fall, he warned us about our democracy and said that they never thought it could happen in the US. And lo and behold, here in Canada, there's too much fascism going on for my sanity. So we're going to get into all of that and what we can do about it with Matthew, but also today we're going to talk about it. It's kind of like an early and often all the time fighting fascism thing, methinks. Yeah. And also we have coming up Sherry DeNovo. She has won the Order of Canada. She is fire. Yeah. She's going to be on the pod for the first time in the beginning of February, and a whole bunch of other great guests on the roster waiting to talk about what's happening in our country. So just to bring you up to speed, in case you've been lucky enough to avoid the news in the last week, we have a situation, yeah, right, where Donald Trump has now started what he calls the golden age of America. I'm calling it the dark age of America, because in the first couple of days, not only has he put forward a bunch of executive orders that are only going to serve to penalize the poor and the people we should be helping the most, but he actually got into a public fight with a bishop who asked him for mercy. So if that doesn't set the dark tone, right? I don't know what does. And also, as if it wasn't enough to fight his tariff threat of 25% across the board here in Ontario or in Canada as of February 1st, we have Captain Canada, Doug Ford, deciding that now's the time to seek political opportunism and grab another majority, even though he's got 16 months left to go. So while we were away from the OShow for the last couple of days, and I want to thank all of you who watched and subscribed. The numbers are huge. You're sharing the pod across all the socials, and our clips are getting hundreds of thousands of views. Like it's nuts, but we appreciate it because we're all in this conversation together. I did an op-ed on Doug Ford and his ridiculous arguments for having an election, and that was in the Toronto Star and elsewhere. So Doug Ford is going to make this ridiculous argument that suddenly now, out of the blue, he needs us to give him permission to spend billions. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Let's just break it down for those who haven't read the Toronto Star op-ed yet. I'll just get to it quickly, and then Douglas, get all over it with your take on this election call. Ford essentially put forward two arguments. One is that he needed a stronger voice. Well, guess what? You have a majority. You got the strongest voice you're going to get going into a campaign where you're going to get assailed for your terrible policy record on healthcare and education and overspending and the RCMP scandal and everything else, or Greenbelt scandal. Not a strong position, so that's bullshit. And the second argument, Douglas, he put forward is, of course, the one about the money. He needs permission to spend billions. This from a guy who was going to go ahead with a stupid tunnel under the 401 that would cost between 50 and 100 billion. This from the guy that spent $2.2 billion on retrofitting Ontario Place that nobody freaking wants. This from a guy who spent $250 million canceling a beer contract early just so that he could put beers in corner stores for the election we all think he's going to call by March break. Okay, Douglas, that's enough of me. Go, my friend. Where are you with the election thing, with the fascism thing? You go, my friend, and we'll pick it up from there.
Okay. First of all, fascism is never fashion. Okay?
Yeah, well said.
Just not fashion, right? And it's also not friendship. So just let's not do that, right? Okay.
Good point.
On the Doug Ford thing, also, when you say he's got a majority while leading by a large margin in the polls. So his legitimacy is not even being questioned.
Exactly.
Right? Number one. Here's the thing. And it's ironic that this is happening now when we see what's happening with Alberta. But Doug Ford says that he needs a mandate. No leader of any jurisdiction needs a new mandate to defend themselves or defend their jurisdiction from an external threat. That's the job. That's the job. That's what we elected them to. That's the job. That's why you're on call 24/7 when you're an elected official. That's the job. It's like, no, you do not need a mandate for that. Danielle Smith, out in Alberta, Yankee Doodle Danny, who's flying down to Mar-a-Lago and happens to be taking a vacation in Panama. Interestingly, with the guy south of us screaming Panama, Greenland, and Canada in a kind of world with like over 195 nations. What were the odds that our vacations would be in Panama? That struck me as a little weird. But anyway, she's there, and all of a sudden, she's not on Team Canada.
There was an excellent op-ed in one of the papers that, or a cartoon, editorial cartoon that showed Team Canada, and it had everybody's name on the jersey but hers, right?
Theo Mudakis.
Yeah.
And now Scott Moe seems to have gotten a phone call because he seems to have joined her. But what she's doing, not wanting to put oil on the table, saying, here, carve this out. Let's go this whole other way. That is something that would require a new mandate because nobody in Alberta voted on that.
And isn't oil also the single biggest export to the US? If we're going to do a united front against the US and punish them, it's got to be an energy tariff. And so, I mean, pulling that piece out obviously weakens Team Canada.
Up until Scott Moe went the other way, right?
Mhm.
It was 13 versus 1.
Yeah.
The 12 premiers of the provinces and territories and the prime minister versus one premier going her own way. Yes. And going her own way, saying, basically, I'm okay and all good with being on Team Canada, so long as I don't have to sacrifice everything and everybody else has to go first. Well, so long as I don't have to sacrifice anything,
Yeah,
and
that's
so long as
something on a
everybody has to
team.
sacrifice first. That's putting the I in team,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So everybody's rowing, and she's just like got the oars in the water and is just stiff. Well, you can't do that, right? There are times where you have to be on Team Canada. External threats, existential threats, when someone starts musing aloud about economic annexation by economic force, that would be a moment to not get your hair done and make yourself look pretty for him.
And you know what? The use of force.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, and force is force, right? Like economic force, military force, propaganda force,
All of it.
communication force. Anytime you decide that you're going to put force on the table, it's a hostile position.
Let me put it.
I'm negotiating a contract and someone says they're going to force my rates. That ain't no negotiation anymore. That's a threat. That's intimidation.
Right.
Our country is under threat. There's really 3 things I see here, Douglas. I'd love your feedback. You can rate them on what you think might be the more probable. One is an insidious economic union that starts with a joint currency, like the EU did with their money, with their currency, then starts with a takeover of our banks, then starts with an investment taking over our oil fields, etc. And before we know it, we are American in all ways that matter. The second thing that I see is a much more obvious and traumatizing thing of getting Alberta to do a referendum to leave and to join the US. I went through one referendum I lived in Quebec. It was very stressful. And the second one, watching Pache on that one, was very stressful. At Alberta, I mean, she's teeing it up. So my third is, of course, the worst one of all, which is one that involves the threat that he's made to Panama. He said in his State of the Union he's going to take Panama. So, military force, expansionism, colonial, all that crap is on the table with Trump. So which one do you think is the one we should be girding against the most? Or you can pick all of the above.
Oh, I would say the monetary stuff is the one first.
Yeah.
Particularly anything that has to do with banking policy, because that's the first time. If you lose your banking policy, that's it.
Mm.
Right? Everything else just falls. So any type of talk of a type of union of central banks.
Yeah. And just
because
for
that means common currency, right? But
Right.
even before that, just say common currency, because that'll probably be that would probably be the dog whistle or the focus tested way that doesn't sound threatening, right? Wow,
Nice.
look how much more money you would get, right? So common currency means having a common central bank, which means that you have the American dollar, because they're certainly not going to turn to the loonie, right? Which means that when there's a crash or something and they need to make a decision on interest rates or what they're going to do to change the value of the dollar in any way, that's always going to be made in the interest of now 50 other states, and then Canada, versus us having that control ourselves.
And if I can make two fine points on that, one is Carney at the Bank of Canada did not buy into that crazy housing shenanigans because he didn't, as he said on the Daily Show, even understand all of that mortgage crap. And
He
so
didn't understand it because it could not be understood.
it could not be in it because it was a scam. It didn't make sense, and it put people underwater with their mortgages and caused the great collapse that we saw in 2008. So he got us out of that. He saved us from that. That's one thing people should realize. There's a lot of propaganda about Carney coming from Conservatives in the UK. Whatever, he can defend his record, but we know what happened with him when he was in Canada. And so if there's a combined banking system, that's the kind of safeguard we won't have access to. And the other thing that I think is important for people to realize is that people seem to think that, oh, well, you know what, if they took us over, we'd be the state that would be progressive. We would turn the balance of power in Congress. That's all bullshit. We will not have any power. Look at Puerto Rico. Well, why would they give us power? And a business guy even asked me, will we get compensation? And I said, oh, yeah, because that's what dictators and invaders do. They send you a fat check for your trouble. I mean, there's no upside. And to your point about the testing the narrative and how clever it is, O'Leary was clever clever to say, you know what, economic union, but not a threat to our sovereignty. But
yes.
As you're spelling it out, how could it not be? You know, any rope we give to the U.S. will be enough to hang ourselves as a country.
But economic union, like I said, common currency, that is your sovereignty.
Right.
That is it.
Right.
You no longer control the levers of your economy. Right. That's your sovereignty right there. I mean, there's other stuff, then there's military, but that's your sovereignty. Right there, he's just like handing it over, like he's talking about politics. Like it's just happening.
So let's get
accept it.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the fascist threat because I said it off the top, and I even put out a 5-point checklist, which I know you saw, on fascist narratives and how they try to trick people in social media and elsewhere. Right? They sort of have a 5-step process, and I'll you know, anyone can check my social feeds; it's everywhere. But from a communication point of view, I get assailed with every kind of attack you can imagine has come at me, and so I've learned now their methodology. So I wanted to share that for everybody, so you can also, you know, speak up and push back. But when you see Elon Musk doing that salute, that Nazi salute, and everyone's trying to tell you it isn't, or what about when other people have put their hands in the air? It's about context. It's about what the man believes. It's about what he's trying to activate in political parties around the world. It's what he has stood for, and it's also a very deliberate gesture. So I'm not going to entertain any equivocation around what was intended with that. There is a brazenness. There is a stating the quiet part out loud that's happening. And the fact that, you know, he has endorsed Pierre Poilievre, and Alex Jones, as I understand it, is endorsing Poilievre. I don't understand, as I said on the OShow scandal panel, how anyone who is serious about protecting the sovereignty of our country can possibly justify the risk of putting Pierre Poilievre in a majority position. And I was happy to see, Douglas, for our viewers who might not have seen this yet, that a new poll came out. It's just one. ECOS came out, and it shows that the gap between the Conservatives and the Liberal has narrowed to, I think, 8 points from 20 or 25 where it has been. And it's been since Trump's inauguration. So I think Canadians are waking up to the very real threat of having Trump dominating our country from his throne and from trying to put someone in place in Canada. And until Poilievre disavows all those endorsements and lets us know clearly that he's, you know, does not want to court the MAGA right in the U.S., I am not going to be able to trust him. He won't even get his top level security clearance. It's madness. No. What was your take on the poll? Where do you think it's at, and what do you think the risk is to fascism in our country?
Okay. Well, going to the poll, because I was looking at that data, and on December 18th, ECOS had a 25-point spread between them. And then on January 7th, it dropped to 16. So that was around the time where the Prime Minister stepped aside. Yeah. Announced that eventually he would step aside. So there was already a bump from that. So there's some interest. And then ECOS, which usually releases a number once a month, started polling a little more often. So they went, because that was January 7th, right? Instead of the 18th. So, and then they had one on the 15th where that narrowed to 11. And then they went out and did another one on the 18th, but they nearly doubled their sample. for this one. So instead of about their usual 1036, they went and sampled 2047. So that will have a much smaller margin of error.
Okay.
That one says a lead of 9. So the first time it's under double digits. And then he posted something, Frank Graves posted something about 3 hours ago. Quick update. The margin between CPC and LBC has now shrunk to a barely significant 5 points in our most recent 4-day roll-up. I have rarely seen such a straight line decline. The NDP are now at 13%. This is a profoundly different voter landscape than even a month ago. Okay. And you have both Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh yelling and screaming, reopen Parliament, reconvene Parliament. Let us remind the viewers, or maybe not following the ins and outs of Parliament, that since about 2 weeks from the time that Parliament reconvened from the summer break in September until it broke until December, about one bill passed, and that was the GST cut, because the Conservatives are leading a filibuster that the New Democrats or the Bloc could lift at any time for any bill, saying, for this specific bill, we will lift it, because they did it for the GST holiday. They want Parliament to come back. We need Parliament to come back now because proroguing makes this ineffective. There was nothing going on in Parliament at all. When Parliament was open and operating, they were doing nothing. They were passing nothing. They were stalling absolutely everything. And now they want you to believe that they want to go to Parliament to reopen it, to take action, when both of them have sworn up and down and all around that the first thing that they're going to do is vote non-confidence in this government. And while they are both screaming right now that we are leaderless, we are not. That's the beauty of the Westminster parliamentary system. The Governor General is our head of state. She ensures continuity of government. We always have a strong prime minister until we do not, and another one is sworn in.
And Harper
We
prorogued, right? Harper
always.
prorogued. We've been through the prorogation before. That's all smoke and mirrors, because if my poll numbers were rolling down a mountainside of snow into a giant snowball of downward momentum like Poilievre's are right now, I too would want to do anything to stop that snowball from hitting the ground.
And that's why he wants an election now, right?
That's right. He's going to do everything that he can to get an election and to try to make it look like some kind of rules are being broken, some kind of norms aren't being followed, that's anti-democratic, that there's going to be a new liberal leader who will become the prime minister until a general election. That's all garbage being spewed because he's terrified of that rolling snowball. And you know what? If the most powerful men in the world, Trump and Elon, were coming at my country, and also Elon endorsing me, I'd be a little worried too that Canadians are going to wake up and go, wait, hold on a second. The guy who's threatening our country with massive tariffs and doesn't want us to have a border anymore, Trump, most powerful guy in the world, and his bestie, who's moving into Mar-a-Lago into a bigger bungalow, who's the richest man in the world, who did the Nazi salute in front of the world just after Trump's inauguration. Timing and context, folks. He is endorsing Poilievre, and so we're supposed to say, oh, there's no risk at all to having Poilievre in place when the guy endorsing him is also the guy who did the salute, who's working with Trump. Add a layer to that, and this is a little bit Ontario politics, but it matters. We got Captain Canada out there, Doug Ford, standing up for Canada, saying he needs a new mandate for Ontario, which is not true. And at the same time gave Elon Musk this sweetheart Starlink deal where he overpaid by tens of millions of dollars for Elon to get internet in Northern Ontario. There's a hue and cry. Finally, Bonnie's woken up. He called Elon like something like a man-child or something, and saying, you can't sign the deal.
Well, yeah. Well, let's go to what you were talking about, Pierre. Remember, he had that press conference as well, right? Where he joked about, hey, maybe his 3-year-old kid wants to go to Mars. She should be put in contact with Elon. And hey, maybe we should, be doing more business with Elon. Well, gee, that kind of aged really well since then, didn't it, Pierre? Huh? Way to go.
Yeah.
It's like the guy who's best buddy with the guy that's threatened economic annexation, and you come out after like X number of days in hiding. I think it was like almost 3 full days of hiding, and you say we should be doing more business with the guy who's often sitting at the first lady's seat, with the guy that threatened economic. Hello?
You're referring
Hello?
to Anya.
Yeah, right. But so you move over, right? It's like at this point, we're both PR people, right? It's like you would want to be running from this guy's endorsement in Canada. Would you
I'm,
not think?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because here's the thing, right?
And then hold on a
Yeah,
second.
go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
And then so you're switching to Doug Ford.
Mhm.
Now he did that before this, but there's a tiny little mess he needs to clean up. And before anything else, it's not like Doug Ford can break a deal.
Yeah, right, exactly. He'll pay any kind of penalty to break a deal. We know that from the beer store. Good
So
points, Douglas. And I have to say that from the PR lens, from the crisis management lens, of which we both know how to do, which is why we have shows like this, because we call this shit out because we can see it for what it is. You've got this easy way out. If Elon really, really, really was not signaling that he in fact supports far right wing parties like he does with, Germany, he can say so. If he didn't mean to signal to the world a Nazi salute, he can say so. If Poilievre does not want anything to do with any of that, he can say so and disavow Elon's. Like they all have the power, folks, to speak for themselves. So when one more person tries to tell me, well, yeah, to your point, who owns who? But my point is this. I don't need you to tell me 50 different times why Poilievre won't get a top level security clearance, or why, in fact, there's no risk at all to him, or why Elon's not really a supporter of fascism. They can do it themselves. They can stand up and say in front of the world, I disavow fascism. I disavow doing business with anybody who's close to fascism. I disavow anyone who endorses me, whose values are not aligned with those of a democracy. I mean, they can do this. They can clean this stuff up.
This is a layup.
It is a layup. Explain.
But they can't do it.
Yeah.
They can't do it. So when you're talking about the mandates, right? Doug Ford says he needs a mandate like this and that. And you've got Danielle Smith, basically, Albertans are finding out, hey, wait a minute, it's not it's not even party over country, it's oil over country. I am convinced that there are a lot of Albertans that are extremely proud of their oil industry who still would like it to be Albertan.
Yeah.
Right? So nobody signed on to that. That's the type of stuff for which you do need a mandate. So right now you have a juxtaposition that's extremely revealing at the moment with regard to what we need to say about Danielle Smith. This is creating a moment for Doug Ford, who, let's remember, not too long ago, because in approval ratings was down to the bottom of the barrel like this. He's having a moment right now.
Yep.
So, political opportunism, why wouldn't you roll the dice? So that's what he's thinking. You got Pierre Poilievre, right? Elon Musk. He endorsed the AFD. The AFD is the party from which Christine Anderson, who came and had a meal with Leslie Lewis and Colin Kerry and Dean Anderson, that's the same party she comes from. And Pierre Poilievre, till this day, has never condemned that with his own voice. There's no video and there's no audio of him. There's a statement released by Brian Lilly that says that Pierre condemned this, but there's nothing on party letterhead, on his website. There's nothing. He did not. There's nothing, no evidence other than Brian Lilly saying that Pierre Poilievre has.
Well, we know that we know Brian's got exquisite sources close to conservatives, but the point is, leaders need to speak for themselves. And if they are going to stop a crisis, it's PR 101, get out in front of it and stop it. The reticence of Poilievre.
Here's why they can't.
What's up?
But here's why they can't.
Right.
Pierre, I'm not sure if he's realized it yet, or maybe he does, and that's why he's completely changed, because he's before every camera. Now he keeps on going into hiding, right? There are certain factions within the conservative movement. Back in the days when I was young, there was one progressive conservative party, and it was that or nothing, right? But now it's a bit like the States. So we have we have the old traditional progressive conservatives who are a little bit homeless right now, to be totally honest. Then you have the Harper-style conservatives, right? Harper, slow, incremental change, that type of stuff. Try not to make too much waves, be boring, but get stuff done quietly, right? He put out a video the other day. He tore a strip off Trump. I haven't seen Pierre in front of a media who asked him, your former boss said some things about Trump. Do you agree with him, yes or no? Pierre can't say yes, because all the Trump supporters in his base will view that as an act of lack of purity. And then all those votes and all those donation dollars and they are very reliable voters, and they are frequent small dollar donors, just run to the arms of Max Bernie, who's waiting and saying, "Come to me, my children."
I'm kind
If
of
he
loving.
says, if he
I'm kind of.
says, if he says he's with Trump,
Yeah.
then all of the Harper business CEO type conservatives. Wait a minute. Rule number one of the people that have the big money:
Mm.
don't f with my money.
Mhm. I'm
That's
glad
gonna
you
f
said
with
that.
his money.
Because on my LinkedIn page, people with some cashola, I'm assuming business leaders, are not loving Ford going to an expensive, non-essential election, right? Like they might be Ford supporters, but they're like, what the hell's with that? And I heard in my op-ed about Canada, about, how leaders need to step up now into this breach, and we need to stand together for our country, shoulder to shoulder and all of that. I heard from business leaders who I'm pretty sure are probably conservatives. And I think so on the Ford front, he may be penalized in the numbers. I mean, obviously the Liberals have got to get their game together in order to
Yep.
pose any kind of block to Ford, maybe
Yep.
keep it to a minority. They're going to have to do a lot and fast.
Yep.
But federally, the Carney question. I mean, Carney hasn't even won the thing yet. I think he absolutely will. Champagne just came out for Carney, so it's a done deal in my mind. But I floated back to some of these business leaders about Carney, and they didn't come back and go, no, 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 Poilievre to the death. Because to your point, they're more Harper conservatives, maybe federally. They don't love this MAGA garbage, this Canadian maple MAGA garbage, and they actually just want a solid economy. Couldn't stand Trudeau, but if a Carney figure comes in and says, you know what, I got a plan, let's just get through this without upheaval and without having to deal with Poilievre. I mean, I think Poilievre is in big trouble. I really do. And I think that the poll numbers, I mean, wait until Carney versus head-to-head, Carney versus Poilievre. That's the polling I'm waiting for, Douglas.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, me too. But Poilievre right now, there's 4 questions he can't answer right now.
Okay.
Right? Do you support what Harper said against Trump? Yes or no? Do you support Danielle taking oil off the table? Yes or no? Do you agree with Doug Ford that at this time it should be Canada first and every other consideration is secondary? Yes or no? And when you came out of that meeting that the Prime Minister had with all the leaders of the parties, that very extraordinary meeting, and for about 12 seconds, you said that you were going to contact people and be on Team Canada. What specifically have you done since then to help Team Canada?
See,
He can't answer any one of those 4 questions truthfully and not get part of his base very angry and call him impure. And he can't do that and try and sell himself to the actual progressive conservatives.
so I mean, the Weasley way out of the first
And
3
Doug
is to
Ford's
say,
appealing to them right now.
yeah, but I mean, the Weasley way to get out of the first 3 is to say, you know what, my focus is on blah, blah. I'm not going to comment on the act of other elected officials, blah, blah. They have their own, I mean, he can get out of those. The last one is more difficult because it's asking for specifics on actions he took to his own commitment.
Mhm.
And I think that is significant.
But
Also,
the first one he's going to have a little trouble because if Doug Ford goes early, that delays when a federal election can come. And I don't think he can skate on for that long.
yeah, and so with the Doug Ford thing, I mean, as I said, I think on one of the recent shows, I think the play is get another mandate,
Oh, yeah.
wait, let Carney get in federally, let them have a little bit of roadway, and then come up as the great savior, the new head of the Conservative Party federally. But
Absolutely.
I think that's the play. But I have to say,
Absolutely.
isn't it great to watch the right have to go through stupid purity tests? Like I have long hated the purity tests on the left because I thought that they were self-emulating. They didn't make any sense. Like why would you do that to yourselves?
And he's not even meeting the moment. He's
Mm.
still talking about cutting taxes or a carbon tax, and everybody is Justin Trudeau. Look, there's no Trudeau.
hmm
Freeland is renouncing the carbon tax. Carney is renouncing the carbon tax. Carney got Guilbeault's endorsement, and even Stephen Guilbeault said, hey, if you can find something that achieves the same things in terms of outcomes as the carbon tax, that is not the carbon tax, I'm in. I'm agnostic. So there's no Trudeau and no carbon tax. And it has now been 2.5 weeks, 3, since Trump has mused aloud about economic force. And you can't say anything except for one line in a press release that says Canada will never become the 51st state. That's it. That's the extent of your standing up for Canada. You've had 3 weeks. You've been asked 3 times, at least in press conferences, whether or not you support taking oil off the table. And then you got cute and said, well, we don't import very much oil and gas from the United States, so one-on-one retaliation wouldn't do much for us. Well, how about export tariffs? Or how about just cutting off supply?
So you're
You
saying
know that's what we're talking about.
three times before the rooster crows? Is that what we're talking about here?
How many chances do you get to whiff at a ball before someone has to write the column that you're not on Team Canada?
So here's the thing with Poilievre. He can correct this narrative anytime he chooses.
Yes.
So the question is, why isn't he? And I think that's the question that Canadians have to really wrestle with. If you're out there trying to defend the Nazi salute by Elon Musk, ask yourself why you're spending your time trying to defend anything to do with Nazism and fascism. And secondly, if you are Pierre Poilievre, Poilievre can absolutely get ahead of these things. In fact, I even had someone who's a Poilievre supporter see, I think the video I did asking why he doesn't have security clearance has had over 115,000 views or something just on X. And somebody said, you know what, enough, like I'm a Poilievre supporter. He needs to stop this narrative. You know, there are some people who just realize that he is creating his own what is it in football? I'm not a huge sports fan, but when you do an error on yourself, right? An unforced error, right?
Yeah, unforced error, yeah.
These are turning into unforced errors. So I think the plan was to just run out the clock. I'm mixing my sports analogies here, maybe. Run out the clock and try to make sure that you slide in, get your security clearance when you become prime minister. No one's the wiser, and then we become what? 51st state? I don't know. But now with the polls changing, with Canadians looking at Trump and Elon and saying, what the fuck is going on in the United States? This isn't campaign bluster. This isn't bloviating bullshit. These are actual executive orders that are causing a huge crisis in the US. You think we have a problem with refugees and immigrants now, Canada? Where do you think all these people are going to go as soon as ICE starts to round them up? I mean, we are at a serious time. And the last thing we need is to have someone wanting to be prime minister who won't get top level security clearance, who won't denounce the worst of the worst endorsements coming from the very country that is threatening us. I mean, come on.
And can't pivot.
Poilievre, straighten this shit up for the sake of Team Canada and for the rest of us, or don't, and we'll have to do whatever we can so he doesn't get elected. I mean, it's craziness.
He can't pivot. He can't pivot. He's still talking carbon taxes. He's talking capital gains taxes. It's Trump.
Right.
It's Trump.
Yep. It's an election on our overall economy and on our sovereignty, and it's not about any of his stupid slogans. Nobody's talking about jail, not bail now. And this whole just like Justin attempt at a 3-word slogan, I thought Justin was a drama teacher. Mark Carney is like a successful international banker. You might not like that. I've heard the word WEF a million times. A lot of the base hates that he's part of the World Economic Forum. Okay, fine, whatever. You don't like that, but you can't say he's just like Justin. You know, like, their resumes are not the same.
Right. So here's like when you're talking about the polling and you're putting on all this together, right? This is the conclusion that dawned on me, and I said it on my show the other day. Is what if all along, because there was one piece of data that was interesting in the polls the whole time, was Pierre's personal negatives, right? They were always sky high. The party was way ahead of the Liberals, but nobody really liked him. He, despite the fact that the party was polling at 45, he was a drag on the party, which is amazing as a phenomenon, right? You don't see it in that case. It's 45. What if all along, instead of radical change to the type of conservatism or Trumpism or that type of stuff that he wants to bring, Canada was just tired of Trudeau and just wanted a nice, clean, respectable, confident, competent person who can speak in complete sentences that we can leave unsupervised with a pack of matches.
Who doesn't get endorsements from white supremacists or from, all kinds of nefarious folk, who is not deep in conspiracy theories, who is not rude to reporters and condescending to women. I mean, hello, maybe Canada just wants an adult.
What if they just wanted an adult that was not Justin?
Yeah.
And the narrative for the whole last 2 years, oh my God, what if it was just like No.
You know
Just
what? Yeah. Like, just get rid of Justin. He's had his time. He's run too long. He's gotten annoying. He got his eye off the ball. We have a crisis, and now we're under threat from the most powerful nation on earth. And we're flirting with the richest guy on earth, who's pals with that guy and helped him get the job as president again. Like, we have real threats. We have two barrels facing us, Canada, and
we
we
tend to be a
deal with.
reasonable people. We tend to be a pretty reasonable people.
Mm.
What if that's all it was?
Right. And
He's not ready for that campaign.
the number one question I've had from business leaders, my clients, etc., for the last year, and my colleagues is, well, then who do I vote for, Laura? If Poilievre is this and Jugmeat is that, then who do I vote for? I've heard that 1,000 times. And I'm like, let's wait and see. But obviously, I understand you can't vote for Trudeau again. Makes perfect sense. Now it's like, tell me more about Carney. That's the number one question I'm getting. And I'm
Right.
like, well, I know his record when he was at the Bank of Canada, and I know how he did on The Daily Show, and I know from what he has said his values are, he has to be pressure tested in a campaign for sure. Give him a chance as prime minister until they throw into a federal election, and let's see what he can do. I'm not a Carney apologist. I don't know the guy.
Right.
I'm not working for him at all or anyone. But the shift to, okay, tell me about this option. It's not about, as Mark Cripps said brilliantly last week on the Scandal panel, it's not that Canadians hated the Liberal Party, de facto. They just hate the Liberal Party. No, they were sick of Justin. And I think it was a mistake for Poilievre and every trucker who flew those F Trudeau flags to make it singularly about him, because they pretty much left the Liberal brand unscathed. Now I'm seeing they're realizing their F Carney flags look really stupid, so they're doing F Liberals. A little too late, guys, right? You made it all about the guy. The guy is gone. And now Canadians are like, okay. And if Ford goes ahead with this election and gets a majority again in Ontario, you don't think that's going to motivate however many millions of voters in Ontario to make damn sure that Poilievre doesn't get into place there as well? I mean, there are tectonic plates shifting in world orders, and in the United States is no longer a functioning democracy. If you look at the executive orders coming out from Trump, we're not going to recognize the U.S. in 6 months. So I mean, this is
It's
a time
going to happen real fast.
Real fast.
Fast.
And can I just pick one bone with the CBC? I did it on Twitter, but I'm going to say it now. I'm a huge supporter. I gave them props last week for their interview with that Christy Clark and how they caught her with real journalism. She got out of the race. Yeah, chef's kiss. But you know what? This morning, I'm listening to News Around the World, as I tend to do, because I like to see how everyone covers things. And the BBC leads their Trump story with the fact that Trump is reneging on asylum approvals already given to refugees, including people who helped them in Afghanistan, right? And that's their lead story. And I'm thinking, wow, it's Canada, and in the news out of Germany, everyone's leading with that. And I'm like, wow, as Canadians, that's going to have a deep impact on our borders, especially at places like Vancouver, etc. And then what does CBC lead with? Trump's considering revealing what happened in the JFK assassination. I'm like, seriously? Our national news media, when we're under threat of dealing with his policies on immigration and we're under a trade war, I gotta follow the shiny fucking ball that maybe he's gonna give us a new conspiracy to chew on while he kicks people out of his country. I mean, and sends them here. I mean, we have to understand Canada media, for fuck's sakes. It's not that I love having a top podcast now. It's kind of sweet to have this many subscribers and viewers and people watching our clips. I think we're probably dominating on the clips at least. But
someday.
Yeah, but you know what? I would prefer a robust media. I would prefer that corporate media put aside their little money-making, framework for a second and realize that protecting our country is the priority. And I wish that the CBC would realize that Trump is going to throw every single sexy bauble he can so that we take our eyes off what's really going on. Like, focus, people, please. Thank you.
Yes. Well, that's it. It's public airwaves. Your duty, whether you're a for-profit or publicly funded, is to serve the public.
Right.
Yes. And you need to inform us.
Right.
You need to inform us. And the CBC in particular, right? You have the freedom to do the things the others are not. If everybody else is chasing the bauble, be the one that gives us the in-depth stuff.
That's right.
Reformat the 24-hour news thing so that we don't get the same 5 items 4 times and actually just have, let's have more discussions. Let's have in-depth stuff. Let's have
Full
conversations like this.
Yeah, full transparency. I used to work for CBC. I was a CBC television journalist out of the Windsor Bureau. But I can tell you, nobody told me what to write. I'd go and I'd pitch my stories. I'd go pursue them, and they'd go through legal, and they'd go through. The editor would select, and then the person they write the news order and all the rest of it. There's a framework to doing that kind of media. But also, my husband works for CBC, has for 25 years on the technical side. I support the work of the CBC when they're doing the work that they should be doing, and when they get off track. I was very critical of them during the Gomeshi scandal. This morning was a miss, and I hope they correct it and quick, because I cannot, if our public broadcaster can't focus on the serious stuff, we're in trouble. So like I said, I'm glad that the new media sphere is so robust, and I support all the other pods in this country, and media changes like anything else, and legacy media is going to have to adapt. But while we still have Canadian dollars, do us a favor and don't fall for the sexy bits, because don't we all want to know what happened? Was it the grassy knoll or the mob, or of course it's the conspiracy.
It's human nature. We're curious.
Right. But you know what? I'm not more concerned about that than I am a national housing crisis of hundreds of thousands of freezing Canadians, and now having a whole bunch of asylum refugees from the US that we have to help coming into our country. That's my concern. So let's get our shit together. Let's be Team Canada, and let's make sure that whether it's Pierre Poilievre or Doug Ford, they repudiate, that they renounce, that they let us know that they're truly Team Canada, and that their own selfish ambitions, whether it's a majority Conservative for Poilievre or whether it's the majority again in Ontario, that their own selfish ambitions do not dominate their agenda. We need them to be on Team Canada 100%. Business leaders are standing up and doing it. Average Canadians are saying, fuck it. I thought I was going to spend my time looking at the Super Bowl and hockey. Now I got it. Now I got to fight this shit. So come on. Douglas,
Yeah, absolutely.
You, my friend.
Well, I'm just saying, the very simple question is whether you believe Doug Ford is sincere for putting on an act when he does this Captain Canada or Coach Canada thing.
Right.
Why can't Pierre say what Doug Ford is saying?
Right.
The song Say My Name, Say My Name?
Yeah.
The person's on the phone and everything they say just, oh yeah, me too, I love you, me too. Or they say, love you, I love you too.
Yeah.
Why are you always saying me too? And he's not even really saying me too. It's like, why can't Doug Ford has no problem saying what he is saying when he is standing up for Canada? Why can't Pierre do the same thing? Why? He's had plenty of time. He's had plenty of opportunity. Mark Carney can say it. Karina Gould can say it. Jaime Batiste, if he gets in it, can say it. Christopher Freeland can say it. All the premiers could say it. Scott Moe, for about 2-3 days, was able to say it. Come on, man. This is not hard to say. It's not hard to say.
Unless you're being controlled. Right?
And not only that, but Danielle Smith specifically, right? Remember, she was asked and says, if that happens, there will be a national unity crisis. So not only is she not on Team Canada, she threatened us. Because the only reason that there's a national unity crisis is if she causes one. If you do not do it my way, there will be a national unity. You threatened us.
We want leaders who are fighting for Team Canada, not fighting for their own advancement or for their own donors or for their own bullshit behind the scenes. Right. We need Team Canada. And if they can't full-throated be part of Team Canada, if they're going to threaten unity crisis, if they don't get their way, if they're going to wink at the very people who would invade us, then we need to call them out for that early and often. And more importantly, we don't need to vote for them. We do not need to vote for them. We do not need to accept the game that they're playing or the sides that they're apparently taking. So Canada, don't just curse the darkness, kick at it till it bleeds daylight, to end on a great Canadian note.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the OShow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the OShow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the OShow. It's the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the OShow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the OShow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on the OShow. It's a podcast, the OShow. Laura Babcock's the OShow. Stay informed with the OShow, OShow.
Your merch bin.